So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and just get us started. I dropped a bunch of information into the chat. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. It would be great to know who we have in the room with us today. Angie, just making sure you are viewing the presentation. Wonderful. So my name is Mara Morris. I'm the Grants and Professional Development Programs Manager at the LA County Department of Arts and Culture. Joining me is our Director of Grants and Professional Development, Angie Gaspar-Milanovic. Okay. Thank you all for being here and for showing interest in the Community Impact Arts Grant. We will have time for questions throughout the presentation as well as at the end, but you're welcome to drop questions into the chat, or if something is really burning, feel free to raise your hand. Angie will be monitoring the chat and looking out for that type of need as we move along, and you know, just turn on your mic and speak as needed. So I know that some of you are familiar. Let me get to. I know that some of you are familiar with our work at the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, but if any of you are new to us and what we do, our mission is to advance arts, culture, and creativity throughout Los Angeles County. We envision a region in which arts, culture, and creativity are integral to every aspect of civic life for all people and communities. Before we begin, I want to pause and acknowledge that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Kizh, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands and are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal nations. So I just wanted to let you all know that in collaboration with the LA City and LA County Native American Indian Commission, we at the department have been engaging since March of this year with local tribal leaders on the development of a county-wide land acknowledgement with the intent to also develop toolkits and other resources for both county agencies and cultural institutions. So we will be sharing those toolkits with our grantees and municipalities, and we will continue to update you as all of that information becomes available. So a little bit about the Community Impact Arts Grant. The larger goal of the CIAG program is to support the complex arts ecology of Los Angeles County. And we do this by increasing access and strengthening the quality of arts and arts programming wherever it happens. So this can be in health and human services, criminal and restorative justice, community and economic development or workforce development. We've also worked with environmental justice organizations, to name just a few of the types of organizations that we have funded in the past. A little history about the program. In 2015, the program started with seed funding from the NEA. It was just a $50,000 program that year. And then the LA County Board of Supervisors bought into that seed funding and allocated an additional $1.5 million to support the program over 3 years. So that came to $500,000 in 2016, 2017, and 2018 for those programs. In 2018, the Board of Supervisors increased the annual investment to $750,000 for an additional 3 grant cycles. And now you can see that the grant cycles mirror our county fiscal years. So it's a split July 1st to June 30th grant cycle. And then just last year in 2021, the Board of Supervisors approved an ongoing funding of $750,000 to sustain the CIAG program. The motion signified a recognition of the impact of the program, as well as the county's ongoing investment in the arts and in its cultural policy, which integrates our art services into cross-sector county work. And additionally, the CIAG program recognizes the value of the arts as a vital tool for civic problem solving across a range of issue areas. It was designed to promote and highlight cross-sector strategies, and additionally to support organizations that were ineligible for funding through our other main grant program, which funds specifically nonprofit arts organizations. So this program is designed to provide or to fund arts programming as part of an organization's larger mission to provide services to individuals and communities in areas outside of the arts. The program enables these organizations to deliver a wide variety of cultural services to county residents and supports arts and culture throughout the region. And a little bit of mapping that we did with our research and evaluation team showed us that the CIAG program has funded art services in areas that are not typically served by or not frequently or readily served by the nonprofit arts organizations funded by the other organizational grant program that we have. So a little bit of detail about the awards. CIAG, it provides project-based funding. And so it's not just general operating support, but a unique arts program or project that your organization deals with. So it can be program related, such as salaries, contracts, marketing expenses, supplies, or space rental, but it may not be used for funding personal gain, paid political advertising, capital projects, or fundraising expenses. The award amounts, we'll get into this in a little bit more detail later, but they are calculated based on the number of awarded applications weighted against the final scores that each applicant receives during the panel review process. So final grant awards will be less than the requested amount that you will be putting in your application. And that is why we always recommend that applicants request the full amount of $20,000. This grant requires a one-to-one cash match on behalf of the organization. And on your application budget, we will ask that you project your anticipated sources of funding, such as earned income or other grant fund support. Funds provided by CIAG may not be used to match any other LA County grant, and other County of Los Angeles grants cannot be used as your matching source for the CIAG award. These are a couple examples of, they're no longer current CIAG projects, but they are longstanding CIAG grantees. And in particular, we wanted to highlight that this artistic documentation shows how the project deals directly with the community being served. It's showing artists at work in the community. Additionally, they highlight and demonstrate the success of their projects. And so it's just, I think important, we'll talk about this later on, important to really highlight using your artistic documentation to show the panelists the work that is being done, which isn't always going to be, a glossy, wonderful, well-produced video. It can just be a snapshot of the work taking place. So this is just a really brief overview of the Department of Arts and Culture's Cultural Equity and Inclusion Initiative. This initiative and its many components is actually what we consider the backbone of the department's work. And the CIAG grant specifically stems from the CEII initiative. So in 2015, the Board of Supervisors adopted a motion to create a framework for advancing cultural equity among the region's arts and culture sector. In 2016, the department began a public process that included town halls, stakeholder focus groups, research, and an advisory committee. And actually, this advisory committee still stands today working with the department. In 2017, the department released a report that summarized 13 unique recommendations that rose out of the public process. In 2019, the department began to put together the county's first cultural policy. The policy passed in 2020 by the Board of Supervisors, and additionally in 2020, the Board of Supervisors established an anti-racist policy agenda for the county. And then just last month, the Board of Supervisors approved the LA County Cultural Policy Strategic Plan. So these last few pieces together, the cultural policy and the anti-racist policy agenda, they provide a foundation for pushing our vision further as we continue to strive and foster diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. We're doing that through a deeper commitment to reversing structural and systemic inequality in LA County specifically. So I just talked a lot. Right now, are there any questions or anything coming up that we could address?
Nothing in the chat, Mara. And of course, if you have questions along the way, folks, please feel free to put it in the chat, and I can stop Mara in her tracks and have.
Thank you. Otherwise, I will just continue to, do my spiel. So, so this beautiful chart, our lovely rainbow here, is going to explain to you the review criteria that that every panelist is going to use to score each application. So the first criteria, the maximum point value that can be awarded to this first criterion is the artistic merit, and the score is 35 points out of 100 possible points. A project with an exceptional artistic merit engages qualified and diverse arts or cultural professionals. It provides arts experiences that expose participants to new perspectives. It provides opportunities for engagement in the creative process, and it demonstrates cross-sector understanding, both supporting the arts and advancing community priorities. So it's important to take a look at all of those individual points and think about how you are addressing them in your project narratives. And as you're going through the application, we will explain next to each narrative question which of the review criteria is being addressed by that question, so that you can come back to this chart and kind of think about how to make sure you are answering all of these points in order to score the maximum value. For Criterion 2, an organization with exceptional readiness, managerial excellence, and fiscal responsibility, the maximum point value awarded to this is 20 points. You're going to be showing that your organization recruits and retains an engaged, diverse, and qualified board, staff, contractors, and/or volunteers. You're going to show an accumulated deficit of less than 20% of your total operational expenses for 2 years or more. We recognize that the pandemic has kind of thrown a lot of finances upside down and topsy-turvy. I think this is more prevalent for arts organizations whose maybe entire earned revenue possibly disappeared, but we do know that it kind of hit across many sectors. So there's some just some some attention and explanation is needed there. And additionally, we need you to show that your organization addresses and is taking steps to integrate and reflect the values of cultural equity and inclusion, highlighting any progress that you have made over the last 2 or more years at the board, leadership, and staff level. Competitive applications address all application questions and provide complete information. So your thoroughness in actually completing the application will address your organizational readiness in this criterion. Criterion 3 for a maximum of 15 points is an exceptional project plan, which outlines all aspects of the project with significant detail, including a project timeline. It'll also include a realistic project budget with accurate cost and income revenue information. And so make sure that you take up the real estate that we allow you to explain your budget, both on the income and the expense side. I think having sat through a number of panels at this point, a lot of questions either are answered in the budget or left unanswered due to a budget that doesn't go into detail and explanation. Panelists definitely look to that for answers. So it's important to address questions that you think might arise about your project and your plan. Criterion 4 is a maximum point value of 5, and this is a project evaluation. You will be highlighting the goals and objectives of your project, along with an assessment plan that will be used to measure your project impact. We want to know what success looks like to you. It might be, a target goal of number of participants, or it might be a specific growth metric that the participants will demonstrate. We just want to make sure that you know what success looks like and you're explaining that to us. And then criterion 5, which has a maximum point value of 25. This is a demonstration of knowledge of your target constituents and their needs. So this would include a detailed description of the organization's community. This would include demographic information. It would show how the organization is responsive to the needs of the community that you serve, and a particular emphasis on individuals and communities for whom the arts are not readily accessible. And that the organization addresses and is taking steps to integrate and reflect. Nope. Yep. To reflect the values, again, of cultural equity and inclusion. So we want you to highlight any progress or efforts that you've made over the last 2 or more years to address what you are doing at an organizational level with cultural equity and inclusion. Any questions about the review criteria?
There's one, Mara, from David with New Hope Grief Support. For Criterion 3, can an organization match the grant from their own earned funds versus another grant and/or funder?
Absolutely. Earned revenue is very much a valid source of funding. So you would just need to explain what that source is. I mean, board dues, anything of that nature is on the table. It just can't be another LA County grant because these funds come from net county costs. And so there's just sort of a double dipping rule that we adhere to within the county, if that answers the question. Okay. So a little bit about.
Sorry, Mara, there was one more question.
Great.
I may have missed the answer, but can the match be in kind? That's from Maureen Feldman.
Right. Angie, this, I think I want you to help me answer this question because usually we do not accept in-kind donations as the actual match. The program or the project as a whole, let's say the project costs $100,000 as its own unique project budget. Some of the, and then you're asking for $20,000. So in your project budget, you would be showing the $20,000 request for CIAG funds. You would need to show $20,000 as a match that are not in kind, but then the additional, what is that, $60,000 for your $100,000 project to make it whole, that could, the 60,000 could be in kind. So we understand that in kind is very much part of what makes your world work, but it can't be part of the actual match.
Great explanation, Mara. Thank you. It
Okay.
is, yeah, it is a dollar for dollar match. And part of that is also in our advocacy work that it's, you know, sharing that, you know, it's a $750,000 grant allocation, but it's actually $1.5 million when you look at how it's serving the field. So yeah, dollar for dollar match, but you can include it in your larger budget.
Right. Okay, so the grant awards are, there's a few steps involved in getting us to final award allocations. So as I mentioned before, we highly encourage everyone to request the maximum amount of $20,000 because final grant awards will be less than the requested amount you put in your application. And that is because grant panelists will score every application, and then the application scores let me say this, the request times multiplied by your application score will get us to your fundable request. And then every single fundable request is basically weighted in order to fund the entire field of fundable applications. The Arts Commission annually reviews the applications and the grant calculations or award calculations that we provide. They will establish a cutoff score. So every single application that scores higher than the cutoff score will be funded. And then we just basically have to calculate what that number is based on everyone's fundable request. It's a lot of words. Let me know if I lost anyone there. I think the important thing to know is that the grant request is kind of calculated down twice in the process. So the first time is based on the panel score that your application receives. And the second time is based on, here are all the applications we would like to fund and their fundable scores. So what does that number equal? Each year, as I mentioned, the commission establishes a cutoff score, and it's kind of been hovering around 70 each year. So I think the important thing to note that tells you is that the Arts Commission is intending to fund as widely as possible, as opposed to funding for the most competitive. So the CIAG fundable pool is growing annually, which means the $750,000 has to go farther. And I think that's like kind of the headline of this tile.
Oh, and Mara, and I think you've covered it. Julie asked, typically what is the average cutoff score? And it's been in that low 70s the last few years.
So a little bit about our grant review panels, because it's such an important part of this process. I don't know if anyone here has actually sat on a grant panel before. If you have not, we encourage you to do so. In the chat, I put a link to where you can find information about becoming a panelist on our website. I think it is the easiest way to learn about firsthand what makes a successful grant application. Once you have sat in that chair and reviewed 20 or so applications, you become very familiar about how to get your point across in a way that a panelist who does not know you and your organization can understand and articulate. If you have served as a panelist, thank you. And I just want to say that the panel process allows for a diversity of opinions and experiences. We have a public nominating process, so we really highly encourage you to nominate colleagues or yourself. And again, information can be found on our website under funding. So definitely take a moment. If you have questions about that, reach out to me and I would love to get you involved. If you are submitting an application to the Community Impact Arts Grant, you would not be eligible, or you or anyone in your organization would not be eligible to sit on a CIAG panel, but you would be eligible to sit on an OGP panel and vice versa. So some important Community Impact Arts Grant dates. All applications are timestamped by our online application server, SurveyMonkey Apply. So they just cut it off at 11:59 p.m. And something important to note is that SM Apply is an organization in Mountain Time. So you should go into your settings in SM Apply and update your time to Los Angeles, because it's going to default your program and your settings to Mountain Time. And we want to buy you that extra 2-ish hours if you need it. Hopefully you don't. So in November, all the applications are due on October 5th at 11:59 p.m. And then in the month of November, we at the department are internally auditing every single submission. We just determined baseline eligibility has been met. And if there are any issues with your application or something is missing or not working, we will reach out to you. You will have exactly 1 week to respond, but we do offer that grace period. And if you are able to get us what we need and you meet the eligibility requirements, the application moves forward into the panel review process. So in the winter, panels will meet to review all of the applications and assign a score. In the spring of 23, the arts commissioners will review and approve those scores as well as the allocations. And then in July, the allocations are submitted for approval by the Board of Supervisors, and organizations are notified of grant awards or in early July of 2023. The grants are awarded a 1-year contract. So July 1st, 23 to June 30th, 24 is the contract period, and also the period of the project that we are funding. In August, we offer panel feedback calls if you have questions about your score or anything to ask us about improving or updating information for future cycles. And then in May of 2024 is when project evaluations and final paperwork will be due and submitted into the SM Apply system. Eligibility requirements. So this is, I think, one of the most important steps, and we want to make sure you cover this first, because the last thing we want is to have an individual spend a ton of time on an application for a program that they are not eligible for. We understand that everyone's time is super valuable and the work that you are doing is important. So meeting the eligibility requirements is just, you know, baseline, it's super key. So there's 2 levels of eligibility. One is at the organizational level and the other is at the project level. Make sure that you review the guidelines thoroughly. And if you have any questions about eligibility, I think the easiest thing to do is to reach out to me, email ciag@arts.lacounty.gov, or schedule office hours with me so we can go over whatever it is that you're kind of working on or figuring out, just to make sure that we don't use up your time unnecessarily. So at the organizational level, eligibility is you are a 501c3 nonprofit and or a municipality. Fiscal sponsors are also eligible to apply, so long as they have a Model A fiscal sponsorship agreement with the funded project or the project requesting funding. Your organizational operating budget is $25,000 or more per year. Another requirement is that your principal offices are in LA County, and this would be evidenced by the address listed on your 990. We also require a functioning board of directors for any nonprofit, and that your board meets regularly with 51% or more of the membership residing in California. Additionally, we require that your organization has at least 2 demonstrated consecutive years of arts-based programming, services, or activities in LA County. And those 2 consecutive years need to have been in the last 2 years of 2020 through 2022. The arts-based programming can have, it can include virtual programming. It does not need to have been live and in person, but it certainly can be. And we also require that you have produced or hosted at least 4 arts-based workshops, classes, performances, or presentations each of those 2 years, either virtually or in person. So one thing to note is that fundraising events do not qualify as one of these arts-based workshops, classes, or performances. And since we are requesting 4 per year, that means a total of 8 activities need to be shown by you in your application. There will just be a question that asks, how many activities did you do in the past 2 years? And if your answer is less than 8, you are not eligible. Just keep that in mind. Examples of eligible organizations. So we define an organization as its primary mission to provide art services other than arts programming. We define that as over 50% of an organization's budget is devoted to non-arts related programming. So this is important because if you are considered an arts organization, you are not eligible for CIAG, but you are eligible for the Organizational Grant Program, OGP, which is just an entirely different application. So here's a list of eligible organizations. We fund municipal departments. We fund social and human services agencies and organizations. We do fund religious organizations, so long as you're providing services to the broader community that are not religious in purpose. A little bit of further detail for fiscally sponsored projects. The fiscal sponsor would be the applicant of record, but many of the eligibility requirements still apply to the fiscal sponsee or the project that's requesting the funds. So the applicant project still needs to meet the following requirements of an annual project budget of $25,000 or more, principal offices in LA County, 2 consecutive years of providing art services or activities in the county, less than 50% of your overall budget focused on arts-based programming. So again, if more than half of your budget is for arts-based programming, you would be considered an arts program or project, and you would be eligible for OGP. The fiscal sponsor must possess a Model A comprehensive sponsorship agreement with the fiscal sponsee. Again, fiscal sponsors are eligible to apply for more than one project. And the application will be submitted by the fiscal sponsor as the applicant of record. So there's a specific way that gets filled out. When we get into more details about setting up your user account in SM Apply and the eligibility, we can go over that. So we'll get there in a moment, but the sponsor would be the applicant of record in SM Apply describing the sponsored project. Any questions so far? Are there any fiscal sponsors or fiscal sponsees on the call?
I do have a few questions regarding eligibility, Mara. And one was, if someone is planning to apply for the arts internship grant, would that be considered double dipping into the LAC arts funds? And if they should prioritize one opportunity only. I did share that with, those are two separate grant programs. So if you're eligible, you can apply for both. I did just want to share that with the arts internship application, we opened it up to social service, social justice orgs who are or have been CIAG grantees. So it's currently not open to any organization that's social justice, social service, but has not been a part of this grant program that Mara is covering. So that may change in the future, but for this cycle, that is the rule. And then David is asking, in terms of arts programming and eligibility, what if you host a family camp that incorporates the healing-centered arts into the camp? Does that count?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. And the quick answer is yes, that is eligible.
Yeah, I think, David, it would, because one of the things we do ask in the application is the budget of your arts programming for your organization. So you would describe, is it several camps that happen throughout the year? In terms of getting to that magical number of 8, what kinds of programming is happening in that camp is something to consider. And another question that came in is, does art therapy count for programming eligibility? Yes, absolutely. And we have funded more than one organization engaged in art therapy. And absolutely it does count. And just to reiterate, with the arts internship program question, yes, as Angie said, you are absolutely, if you are eligible for the arts internship program, we encourage you to apply for that as well as for the CIAG program. You just wouldn't be able to show arts internship funding support as part of your one-to-one cash match for the CIAG budget category. And if you are a current CIAG grantee, as Angie mentioned, or have been a grantee of CIAG, then you are eligible for the arts internship program. If you are applying to CIAG for the first time and you receive a grant, then you would be eligible for the arts internship program in the next funding cycle. So a little bit about who is not eligible. Nonprofit arts organizations. So if 50% or more of your organizational budget is devoted to arts programming, you would be ineligible for CIAG. CIAG does not fund individual artists. It does not fund Los Angeles County or federal departments or agencies or programs from those two government entities.
It does not fund local and municipal arts agencies. It does fund, as we mentioned, local municipalities who are not arts agencies, but are producing or programming arts projects. It does not fund private membership organizations that are not open to the general public. And it does not fund K through 12 schools, public, private, or continuation, institutions of higher learning or higher education, such as colleges or university departments. And it does not fund organizations receiving funding from the OGP program or the Arts Ed Collective. So a couple of questions that have come up or applications we have received in the past. Two partnering organizations are not allowed to each submit an application for the same project in order to double your chances. One organization needs to decide who will be the applicant of record to submit the CIAG application. And also an organization or a municipality may not submit multiple projects for review. So if you, let's say, are with a library in a certain municipality, only one project can be submitted. And if someone else in another department of your municipality wants to submit for, let's say, a festival, that would be two entities or projects from one municipality. And so you have to decide as a municipality as a whole who is submitting their application. This, I got a little bit lost on these notes, but eligible projects are arts-based and taking place in Los Angeles County. Eligible projects would be occurring between July 1st, 23 and June 30th, 2024. We do understand and receive many applications for projects that don't fall only within that window, but what you need to be able to articulate is that the funding that you would receive from CIAG would fund parts of the project, whether it's specific dates or unique activities that do fall within that window. We have received many submissions that talk about, you know, a January through December program, and they don't make clear how the funding from CIAG would be allocated specifically from July through December of that period. And panelists get hung up on that. So make sure that you're paying attention to the calendar. We fund projects with a combination of arts activities. It doesn't need to just be one unique program or project. It can be a few different arts activities happening, let's say in an after-school program. And we do fund either new or existing projects. One is not necessarily better than the other. We do think it's good to articulate how you're expanding in either scope or depth, and specifically how this project supports the communities with otherwise limited access to arts programming. Any other questions? Okay. Again, arts education related projects taking place outside of school, both outside of the actual physical school and outside of school hours. So aftercare programs, after school projects, summer projects are all appropriate. Municipal projects by departments or programs that provide services other than arts programming are eligible. Also, there's a little note here, definitely if you are working on arts education related programs or projects, pay close attention to the guidelines for more details about the what we're looking for, what the eligibility requirements are, and also how to strengthen that application. So projects that would be ineligible, we do not fund scholarly research. We do not fund projects held, performed, or exhibited outside of the LA County region. We do not fund programs for private members or clubs. And we do not fund the purchase of equipment, land, buildings, or construction. We don't fund maintenance, existing facilities, any capital expenditures of any kind. And we don't fund travel outside of the county or, hotel or food costs. Those, hospitality, travel absolutely can be part of the program budget. It just can't be part of what you are saying the CIAG allocation would fund. So again, if you are including hospitality or travel, make sure that you're clearly articulating that that's in the one-to-one cash match, or something else that your organization is funding and not the CIAG project fund. And the reason we're a stickler about that is because, again, the CIAG fund is net county costs, and we as county employees are not, travel and hospitality is always a big question mark because that is not what constituents want their tax dollars spent on. So it trickles down to the grant program as well.
Mara, there's one. Actually, after you finish up your ineligible projects, I'll
okay, yeah. For you. Again, hospitality or food costs. We don't fund endowments, cash reserves, or trusts, or any sort of project with religious or evangelical purposes to specifically serve only church membership. And just lastly, general funding for a university presenting series or a museum or gallery. Question.
Question coming from Maureen. Would an educational documentary that engaged film students qualify as a project?
That's a good question. Is it so it's engaging? It's engaging students, but how? In a class setting? You might want to just turn on your mic and.
I didn't know I could. It would be, we're looking to film a documentary on loneliness in Los Angeles, which would include a lot of diverse populations, but we'd be using film students from various locations that would normally not get the opportunity to work on a project like this.
Right. I'm assuming that the film students are just kind of one component.
Yes.
Of the overall project.
Yes, the film students are one project that we're working with a lot of vulnerable older adults, which are another part of the project, trying to demonstrate what it's like to age in LA and be isolated and lonely.
Yeah, it sounds to me like because the scope of the project is out. Well, is the overall scope of the project outside of the university setting?
Oh, completely. In fact, that was a thought that we had. That was an afterthought. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the university, but we would invite, qualified students to participate and, give them a chance to be part of the process.
That makes sense. I mean, it sounds to me like this would be a fundable project, but Angie, do you have any other specific questions or kind of red flags that you're hearing?
I think the major question is what arts programming do communities have access to? Because you would have to outline, one is film students working on a documentary, that's a project, but what kind of arts programming does the community have access to? Whether it's the seniors that you're working with, like, are there other kinds of opportunities that folks would have access to? And again, some organizations with the questions have come up about like art therapy, working with families that are grieving. It can be specific populations that your organization serves, but But you will have to, the panel will want to know who you're serving, how through the arts programming, and what would your artistic documentation look like. So I just to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and also it's that it's really articulating what your organization is and what your organization does beyond just this one project, because there is, once again, the eligibility at the organizational level, and then the organization at the, or the eligibility, forgive me, at the project level. So it's clear that you're seeking funding for a unique arts project, but is your organization itself eligible for the CIAG grant? And I think if you want to just maybe we can hop on a call another time after.
That would be great, yeah, because
workshop.
it's a coalition. It's a whole coalition of multiple agencies, nonprofits that are part of this. So there's like everything from the LGBT Center to Alzheimer's Association to Motion Picture Television.
Yeah, I totally hear it. So I think so in the chat is a link to my office hours, and this goes for all of you. You are welcome after this to email me or to just sign up for the office hours, because I think, Maureen, what we need to do is just determine who the applicant of record is that makes the most sense for CIAG.
Thank you, that would be so helpful. I don't see your contact information here though.
We'll get it in the chat. If anyone joined in late, it probably happened before you were here, but we'll get it going.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so moving on. Oh, we did that. Please enjoy this beautiful photo of Descanso Gardens. And if you haven't visited, I highly recommend that you do so. It's lovely. Okay, so now we're gonna hop into a little bit more specifics about SurveyMonkey Apply and how to physically complete the online grant application. I am just gonna have to find out where we are on here. So the department, we use SM Apply. This is where you will be submitting an application. Additionally, should you be awarded a grant, this is where all of your grant forms will be submitted, as well as where your final reports will be submitted, all inside this one application program. So it's important that you keep your login information handy, and if you are sharing it with other people within your organization, everyone should use the same login. It is much easier for everyone to use one login and share that username and password than it is for each individual person at your organization who touches the application to have their own account, because we are unable to merge applications from two different users into one user's account, if that makes sense. If you do not already have an organizational program or profile in SM Apply, you will need to create a user profile for your organization. You will not select a profile for an individual, or if you do so, you will be ineligible for the Community Impact Arts Grant because it only funds organizations. The way you fill out your user eligibility profile will determine whether the system deems you eligible for CIAG. And additionally, the information that you put in your user profile will populate information in the CIAG application. So if once you get into the application, you realize you need to update some of this auto-populated info, you will need to go back to your user profile and update the information there. So a couple little hints that we want to highlight for everyone. We recommend that you draft your responses in Word and then later copy and paste it into the application's profile itself. The system, you know, it is an online platform and it runs into problems. And so we just would hate for you to lose your work. And also on that note, we recommend that you submit early in case there are any issues with your submission. If you're running into that 11:59 deadline on October 5th, it's a terrible place to be. So please, please try to get your application done early and ahead of that deadline. I will not be checking my emails at 11:59 on October 5th. So no one will be there to support you as the deadline approaches. So that's my note on that. Also, instructions for using the online portal, step-by-step instructions are found in the application instructions, which we have on our website. If you go to the department's website under funding, there's a whole bunch of resources related just to the Community Impact Arts Grant. And under resources are the application instructions. Okay, so new applicants, as I mentioned, will create a new account. If your organization already has an account, please keep using that for each new application. And then it's the easiest way to see all of the applications you have submitted in one place. This page is showing you this circled info dropdown, which will take you to help using SurveyMonkey apply. There's a bunch of frequently asked questions that we definitely encourage you to look at. And technical support also is there to reach out to if you're having a specific issue with the site. Also, if you can't remember your password, on this slide, we're showing you that you can go to apply-lacdac.smapplied.io/acc/p, and it'll allow you to reset your password. And also I'm here to troubleshoot that with you as needed. Okay, so once your user profile is set up, you are ready to get started in the SurveyMonkey Apply system. Getting started, you're going to find the Community Impact Arts Grant button or tile on the SM Apply Systems website. These basically throughout the entire portal, you're looking for green buttons, and green buttons are how you progress forward and how you finally submit an application. So once you find the Community Impact Arts Grant tile, you're going to select more, and then that will take you to a page that will have the actual green apply button. Once you have selected apply, you have now opened up a 2023-24 CIAG application. It will assign you an application number. You can see at the top of this page, this one was from 21-22. And then there's a dash and a series of zeros followed by your unique application number. That is the application number that you will be using for this entire grant cycle. So if you have more than 1 year's worth of CIAG applications, make sure you're looking at the right year's application number for both reporting and for questions as needed. This page shows you how you progress through the application itself. They're a little bit hard to see. They're pale gray, but these circles to the left of each task, they will be partially filled, like a half circle of green if you have started those tasks. And then once you have completed a task, the circle will be completely filled in with green. And that'll show you how far along in the application process you are. So the project budget expenses task. The CIAG fund request that you enter earlier in the application will auto-populate the project request. So this project budget expenses, we're going to ask that you enter project expenses for the proposed project during the grant period in each applicable line item. The two important things to note is that the system does not accept commas, decimals, or any punctuation. You don't need to enter dollar signs, you just need to enter numbers, but no cents, no change, just round up or down to the nearest dollar. And at the very bottom, if your expenses are not adding up to the fund request amount and the minimum match amount, you'll get an error code. So it's going to do the math for you. So just frequently people run into issues or hiccups with these budget forms, but frequently they can be fixed if you take away any decimals, symbols, or any non-number, and also just make sure that your math is adding up. It's important here that you provide budget expense explanations. So down at the bottom of this page, well, this page is showing you the error code, but at the bottom of this task, there's going to be places for you specifically to indicate what, if you put any expenses under other, for you to explain what other signifies, or really otherwise to call attention to anything that you think needs greater context or explanation for a panelist who is reviewing this budget. I just can't reiterate enough that really understanding how a project budget works is so important for panelists to understand how your project functions and how your organization functions. And panelists really do look at these numbers. So it's important to fill it out with care. Then again, for income, your request amount here is going to be auto-populated under government, because we as the Department of Arts and Culture are part of the government line. And then we're going to ask you to fill in the other project income that you are reporting for this at least one-to-one cash match. The income table is where you're going to be filling out the funds that you're raising to produce the project overall. So it can be more than one-to-one. And then down below is the income explanation. And that's where you're going to get into like more detail about who your funders are, what it like, if you have, ongoing annual foundational support or board contributions or whatever it is, to kind of show how reasonable these numbers are. That's going to be really helpful for the panelists. The meets or exceeds requirement, that on here, it will show an error code until your minimum matching funds have been entered. But again, the cash match can exceed the CIAG fund request, but it can't be less than the CIAG fund request. Any question about the budget so far?
Mara, there was just one question on, where can you see the budget template categories in advance as folks are preparing? So I did share the link to the sample app and the instructions. And then once you log in with your account, you'll also be able to access all of the pieces, but the sample app is really detailed, and that's an easy way to, as you're starting to prep your application.
Yeah, the sample app is a printout from SM Apply of every single question you will be asked to input. Additionally, once you get into the system, you'll be able to navigate through each task and look at every single question without finalizing or submitting the application. So you can just keep hitting next at the bottom of the screen, next, 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 or on that main page where it showed you all of the tasks, you can click around. You don't have to enter your information in order. So it's pretty customizable. If for some reason a task gets submitted or completed and you need to make changes to it, reach out to me. We can reopen tasks for you. You might lose the information you put in there in order for it to become editable again. But if you created your answers in a Word document, it should be an easy enough copy and paste to go back in. So now we're going to move on to artistic documentation, which is one of, if not the most important components that you'll be including in your application. You should pay attention to the types of artistic samples that are required based on the type of project you are submitting, project or program. And also, we require that you submit one artistic sample, but you have the opportunity, and we highly encourage you to use the real estate provided and upload 2 artistic samples. So some things to keep in mind. If you're providing a video or audio, it can be up to 5 minutes in length. However, if there's like a really important part of the video and you want to make sure every panelist reviews this one section, it's important to indicate that. And you would in the description, you want to say, please start at, and then put a timestamp or something of that nature. You can also just use images, and we allow I would say the best way to do this is to upload multiple images, up to 10 in a PowerPoint presentation. It would be one image per slide, as opposed to cramming all 10 images onto one page, because it's just harder to view, not as much of a visual impact. And then just keep in mind that the panelists are going to be reviewing a lot of artistic documentation. We generally assign each panel, it's hovered around 20 applications per panel. And so you want to quickly articulate who your organization is, what is the work that you're doing, who are the constituents that are receiving these opportunities? How is it impacting those constituents? And so just kind of trying to keep in mind an individual who is not familiar with you, and how best to get across who you are and what it is that you're doing and the impact of it. With CIAG, showing how the work connects with your mission, it is as important as the quality of the work being shown in your sample. We are not anticipating that you have a really sleek and beautifully produced documentary. We want to know that the work is happening and how and for who. And so however you best can showcase that. We understand that some organizations are working with populations where privacy is really important. And so there have been many ways with either like blurring of faces or showing people from behind, where you can still maintain anonymity, but show us individuals engaged in the art is going to be the most powerful and impactful for the viewer. So it's important that you keep in mind the artistic merit criteria from that rainbow chart. So anytime that you can show engagement, cross-sector understanding, and advancing of community priorities, that should be your goal with the artistic samples that you are submitting. The description of the sample and how it connects to your mission is like, that's low-hanging fruit and a really, really clean and easy way to clue the panelist into the work and your mission. So take advantage of the description and use that space wisely. And then again, just make sure that you use the artistic description to provide context. You want to include work titles, locations, artists, dates, as well as the impact of the work. Again, each video sample or audio sample can be 5 minutes long, but there's no guarantee that panelists are going to sit through and watch all 5 minutes of it. So make sure you're presenting the most impactful part and drawing their attention to that. When in the upload section, you can actually just upload a Word document with a link to Vimeo or YouTube or SoundCloud or somewhere where these samples already live. And then all you need to do is confirm that those links are live through July of 2023. Because these links need to be viewable for the panel process this winter and also for the commissioner and Board of Supervisors approval process going into June and July of 23. We want to make sure you know that marketing materials are not artistic documentation. Reviews and quotes are not usually helpful to a panelist. However, they may be included. We have a section for artistic or for additional artistic documentation, and we welcome you to include that there. Anything else? Yeah.
Mara, there is one question.
Yeah.
And I think it's one that comes up every year. Do samples have to be of what we are applying for? Meaning we may have done mosaicing in the past, but are now applying for pottery classes.
Sure. No, they do not need to be of, if your program is expanding and you do not yet have those specific artistic samples, just make sure you are articulating that. So it's clear that this would be new or expansive somehow. The samples do need to be representative of your organization's mission, and the constituents that you are serving. So if you are, usually doing mosaicing with a specific population, and suddenly this application is for a project that will be serving a brand new population, that might be weird. And we would have a lot of follow-up questions like, how are you reaching this population? Why are you reaching this population? How is this driven to your mission? So we just want to make sure that your artistic samples are representative of who you are and what you do.
And I'd also just like to add, the panelists like to see both the process in terms of the populations that you're working with, and finished product is great, but process is just as important with this particular grant program. We have artistic merit and not artistic quality. And that's a direct decision because depending on who you're serving and what kind of programs you have, it's not about only the finished product. It's really about the process and how that supports your larger mission with your programming. So I think that if you're trying a new artistic discipline, you really want to make sure that you're detailing who you're working with and why, and why past artistic disciplines have served this population well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions about artistic documentation? Because that was a lot. All right, I'm going to move along to knowledge of your community and constituent needs. So this is where you're describing your community. There's a number of ways that we ask you to describe your community. A lot of this data we are collecting for the Board of Supervisors regarding who is being served in their districts and how their districts are being served. So we pay close attention to this information, and it is very important in terms of advocacy and the work we do to try to get more funding to the field. Both parts of this question are important to answer, the who and the how. So we're asking you to speak to the artistic needs of your community, as well as your overall mission needs. And every single applicant is going to answer this question differently based on your organizational structure and the communities you are serving. So you want to link between the project and your mission, as well as between the project and the community that you're serving. You need to be specific here. We're asking you to really hone in on your community in the minutia as well as overall. So we're looking at like what supervisorial district are you serving, and we'll be collecting zip code data later on, but we're also looking for specific information about people and not just numbers. Again, I'll state here, it's really important that you work in a Word document and then copy and paste narrative questions into the SM Apply platform so that you don't lose information. Also pay attention to character length. This is overall, we note down character length, not word count in SM Apply. So that'll be something you'll need to look at as you're typing up in a Word document. Something we like to have you think about is that each panelist is you can just treat them as a potential ambassador to your organization. So what do you need them to know and understand in order for them to turn around and tell their friends about who you are, the work that your organization is doing, and the individuals that your organization is serving? And if you can articulate that in a way that they can fully embody and understand, then you have successfully completed this criterion. And we're getting close to the end. So this is a checklist of all of the supporting documentation that you will be required to upload. Pay close attention to this. This speaks directly to your organizational eligibility, as well as your program and project eligibility. So all applicants will be required to upload artistic documentation. I highly encourage you to upload the maximum amount. Additionally, all applicants are required to upload 2 letters of recommendation or reviews that are from the past 18 months. So that 18 months is key. If you have letters of recommendation from the last grant cycle and it's now over 1.5 years old, you can't just recycle them. And then we will also require your federal Form 990 from the most recently completed fiscal year, but it has to at least be on or after December 31st, 2020. Additionally, if your budget has an organizational budget of $2 million or more, you will be required to upload a financial audit from at least December 31st, 2020 or more recently. Also, your audit and your 990 should be for the same period so that they kind of speak to each other and that panelists can review your numbers as a whole, since we know that there's been plenty of fluctuating numbers from one fiscal year to another these days. If you are a municipality, or a fiscally sponsored project, or a religious organization that may not have a 990, you must submit a reviewed financial statement or annual profit, loss, and balance sheet in lieu of the 990. If you are a fiscally sponsored project, you have to upload both the Model A fiscal sponsorship agreement, as well as that profit and loss statement. When you're submitting as a fiscally sponsored project, the financial documentation in terms of the 990 will be of the fiscal sponsor, but the revenue and expense for the annual operating budget, we want to see that of the fiscally sponsored project, so that we will ultimately be collecting financial information for two different organizations and projects, because we understand that the fiscal sponsor is the applicant of record, but we need to understand the budget and the finances of the project that is being funded. Then this is not a requirement, but I highly encourage anyone who is submitting for an arts ed type project that you include your sample lesson plan or some form of agenda or outline or curriculum that describes the activities and work planned during these classes. Organizations who do not submit this wind up receiving more questions and leaving the panelists more confused than if they had just included this in their support materials. So I can't stress it enough. It's such an important component for the panelists to understand the type of work you're doing and how how the students or the participants kind of meet that work. And then here, additionally, you have the option to submit one piece of promotional material, such as a brochure or a flyer or a newsletter or something else that speaks to your organization. But again, marketing and promotional materials are not considered artistic documentation. And that's why we put a space for them as an optional additional inclusion at the end of the support materials section. Any question about support documentation?
There's one, Mara, from Holly, asking about letters of recommendation. What kind of info do you look for, and who should letters of recommendation be from? And I shared that it can be from, audience members, clients who can endorse your arts programming and track record in the arts.
Yeah.
It can be from, sometimes local city official, another organization. Anything else you'd like to add, Mara?
No, just anything that's going to speak to the value your organization or project is providing to the community. So, really heartfelt, like, emails that have come in from participants are wonderful and so great to read, and just as valuable as, your city council member who is speaking about how valuable you are to their constituents. So it can really run the gamut, but it's anyone who's familiar with your work and impacted by your work is what we want to see there.
And then another question is, if our audit at 990 from our most recently completed fiscal year 22 isn't complete, can we submit our 21 documents?
Absolutely. And in fact, for this cycle, you can submit your 2020 documents. But if you have 2021 documents, that is much preferable. If you're on a split fiscal year like we are, you would not be able to submit documents that end before December 31st, 2020. So if your fiscal year ends June 30th, you would need to submit the documents for June 30th, 2021, if that makes sense.
And David had a question on uploading lessons curriculum in the application.
Mm-hmm.
And where that is.
So when you get to the task of supporting documentation, there will be a section for it. There's a section for all of these various buttons. If you are a 501c3 nonprofit, though, you will not have an area to upload the documentation that's required of municipalities or fiscally sponsored projects. So just make sure that your eligibility profile is putting you in the right organizational category. And if you have questions about that, meaning if you are a fiscally sponsored project or a municipality and you're not seeing that information, then reach out to me and we'll get you straightened out so that you're submitting all of the required documents that will allow your application to be eligible.
And not seeing, oh, let's see. Our 2020 990 is acceptable. We have an extension due to our CPA having health issues. Won't be filing until the application is due. It does have to be on or after December 31st, 2020.
That's right. Anything else?
No, no further questions.
Okay, we are really close, everyone. So just a few final tips. You are the subject matter expert of your work. So just use the application to educate and advocate, and most importantly, to inspire. And I think the most compelling applications get people, get panelists really, really jazzed about who you are and what you're doing. Being a panelist on the CIAG application is a really inspiring job. And so it's heartening to read about all of these things. So you want your application to, like, you know, do that and buoy people and make them happy about the incredible work you are doing at our county level. Keep in mind that panelists are not specialists in every single sector. So if you, like, you know, we're talking about CIAG and OGP and all of these acronyms, and we're just assuming you know what SM Apply is, and we're just kind of throwing a bunch of word soup at you. Don't do that in your application. It's really best to assume that you are educating someone from the bottom up about your work and bring them along for the ride so that they're not left scratching their head and confused and wondering what it is that you're doing and why. It's important to show, not tell. That's where the artistic documentation comes in so handy. Definitely be mindful of character limits, because the application will just cut you off, and in the middle of a sentence you will have no more room. So craft what you are saying carefully, and just make sure you address the what, why, what your project is, why is it important, what are the goals, why are they your goals, why are they important to the mission of your organization. And if you can keep things mission driven, you will go a long way in advocating for yourself. And again, don't use marketing information to answer project narrative questions, because it shows and it kind of reads as off base for what this application is meant to do. A couple other things that are important to keep in mind. Panelists want to know when and how artists are paid. The Department of Arts and Culture always advocates for paying artists. And so if you are working from a volunteer basis, it's important to explain that and explain how and why those decisions have been made. Explain in detail how your project works. You'll do that with your timeline, as well as how you're hiring and training your staff and your artists. The evaluation is super important in how it pertains specifically to your proposal. The curriculum and lesson plan is extremely helpful for your lesson-based programs. I cannot articulate enough how every panelist harps on that if it is missing. And that your artistic documentation is where you're telling the story and showing the story of your project. So really you want to show the breadth and impact of your work with your artistic documentation. And if you have any additional questions, reach out, don't be shy. You sign up for my office hours. We'll have one more workshop on September 23rd. And you can just email me at ciag@arts.lacounty.gov, and I am here to support in however I can. I know we ran a couple minutes over, but I will stick around if there are additional questions. And with that, thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to reviewing applications.
Awesome presentation, Mara. Thank you for reviewing everything. And I just wanted to add, as someone who's been in a lot of panels, err on the side of more detail always. I think the biggest one is it's vague. We don't have enough detail. We don't know exactly what they're trying to do. And it's always, those are the biggest panel notes we give out. Give more information, give those details. You have real estate. We know it's limited. But imagine that you know nothing about this program, and you've got folks on a panel that really want to recommend and have things funded. So give those details.
Yeah.
And let me just see in the chat. A lot of thank yous, Mara. And I will reshare. I will reshare the link for her Calendly. So Calendly, I don't know how you say it.
I don't either.
So you can sign up for an appointment and get those questions answered. You can also email at CIAG. And am I related to the Gaspars in San Pedro? I might be. My husband is the Gaspar. I'm the Milanovic. So he could very well have some second, third, fourth, fifth cousins that we don't know about. But thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, we will go ahead and end for the day, but I hope to hear from more of you soon. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.